Hi, this is Lewis Perkins from the Apparel Impact Institute, and I'm joined today by Kurt Kipka and Emily McGarvey, and we're excited to share with you a new vision for accelerating climate action in the apparel industry. So today what we're going to do is walk through a strategy that we have put together in partnership with many stakeholders to create a vision for where we go next as an industry. It is being presented in partnership with our alliance partners, Textile Exchange, Sustainable Apparel Coalition, ourselves, the Apparel Impact Institute, and ZDHC. So our vision for 2030 is to ensure that the industry is prepared and has the tools and ability to reach its commitment of reducing carbon emissions by a minimum of 45% CO2 emission reduction by 2030. In order to do that, we need to accelerate the expertise and the action that is being called upon by the industry today. So AII, we believe, is poised to establish itself as a clearinghouse for building a registry of solutions that then can be funded and scaled to meet all of our goals. So why this problem and why now? Well, we know that we have an aligned goal, which is our science-based targets commitment for 2030 and the subsequent roadmap to zero by 2050. We've put together several reports this year that are pointing towards what type of work we need to do, particularly in scope 3, as we reduce our emissions impact as an industry. And we also know what kind of stakeholders we need to encourage for greater growth. Those industry challenges really are the lack of transparency and visibility to what types of programs and solutions are out there, and also the lack of alignment to capital. That's not only philanthropic and corporate treasury funds, but also blended capital that will be needed to scale programs and solutions and technologies interventions. Finally, finding the best resources and capacity to expand programs and best practices in the supply chain means that we need to identify all the right partners who are either running a program currently or can plug into accelerating the industry's work for climate. So it's putting everyone in a perpetual cycle of looking for funding, looking for brand partners, trying to identify the right third-party partners. And we're doing it with a very short runway, year-over-year budgeting, year-over-year planning. We believe that it's important that we actually give ourselves a longer runway, and we know that runway starts with the next 8 years to get to 2030. So the problem, we believe, is that we don't know how we're going to get there rapidly. We know there are solutions that exist and are ready to scale, and we just need to get those programs ready to scale and get them out there. Secondly, there are solutions that may be applied in other industries that haven't been tried here, potential pilots, potential programs that we need to test. And we also don't know how we're going to pay for all of it. Not only as an individual brand or manufacturer, we're hearing from you that we don't have the capital identified in all ways to identify programs for scale, but at the same time, we're fractionalizing the approach that's coming from philanthropy and other partners as well. So we believe that based on AII's support for the last 3 years of accelerating programming to get to scale, to reach environmental targets, we are positioning ourselves as a partner to help lead all of the industry stakeholders towards this work. This is inclusive. Everyone's invited to be part of this vision as we describe it today. This is intended to be for us, created by us, for all of the work that we're all doing. And just an example of some of the industry partners that we're working with, the funders who've been currently funding our programs, as well as other climate-related and environmental impact of the fashion and apparel textile sector, as well as some of the key partners, not only NGOs and nonprofits, membership associations, but some of those who are designing and developing tools and programs for the supply chain to utilize as well. So working with all of these partners and many, many more, it's time to accelerate this work. We think acceleration means actually increasing the resources that are available and organizing this in a way that gives greater visibility. So providing the industry with a clearinghouse for quality, scalable solutions that can actually help reach these goals, aligning it to specifically identifying partners to attach funding to this work. We know based on our report on unlocking the $1 trillion opportunity to decarbonize fashion produced with Fashion for Good that we have a big ambitious goal ahead of us when it comes to funding, and we believe we can get started toward that goal of alignment. And finally, again, not only identifying the experts, but also having the resources to bring them into the programming to actually properly resource both financially and through partnerships. So the solution is pretty clear. Now, how do we go about getting there? We also know that climate is defined in many ways, but so many of the environmental impacts that we're looking at trying to reduce or create positive impact are all interconnected. And so while carbon reduction is a key strategy for the types of programs we want to put into a clearinghouse or registry and align funding toward, we also recognize there are other key impacts we're working on, such as water, chemistry, land use, biodiversity, and social and labor. So currently, AII has a model that looks at identifying, funding, and scaling programs from early to mid and late stage. We have played that role for the last 3 years, beginning with mill improvement programs and interventions at the wet processing stage of fabric and apparel production, textile production. Now we want to apply that, identify, fund, scale, measure at a much higher level. Also, as we look at the report that we completed and put out this fall with the World Resource Institute on the roadmap to zero, we have been looking at the areas or levers that the industry needs to focus on for science-based targets and reaching the 2030 goal. And we know that they lay out as the following 7 key intervention areas. We think that's a perfect way to align program work and look at use of funds from blended capital to start reducing carbon in these core key areas. So what this means is that AII, who's been running a handful of programs and working with program partners to solve for environmental impact, now is ready to supercharge itself with your support and with you as partners. When I say that AII is looking to supercharge, I think we're looking to supercharge this function for the industry, which involves all of you. And so what we're proposing today, and we're going to share with you, is 2 very specific value propositions that need to be built for the industry. And we want to do it with all the stakeholders that are involved in this ask. One is a climate solutions portfolio, and one is an aligned fashion climate fund to help fund that work. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kurt Kipka, who is going to talk a little bit more about the climate solutions portfolio.
Thanks, Louis. I'm happy to talk a little bit more about how we'll make this happen. Using the climate solutions portfolio, AII is evolving the industry's clearinghouse and registry of quality programs proven to reduce carbon emissions. We'll do that by building off of a group of existing programs that AI deploys. If we move on to the next slide, here's a demonstration of work that AI is currently doing on a case-by-case, development-by-demand approach. Built within these programs comes the type of experience that AI will bring to our approach for building out the solutions portfolio. First, our Clean by Design program provides the on-the-ground implementation results needed in order to demonstrate what an actual implemented program looks like and the data needed to provide due diligence to such data as it's being tracked and monitored. The second is our carbon leadership program, designed and developed in partnership with Reset Carbon, which has convened industry leaders in order to carve out a strategic roadmap for engagement with suppliers and manufacturers globally. And finally, through that mapping process, identifying sophisticated projects for the industry to pilot in order to determine what solutions are scalable and possible using unique approaches, like our renewable energy project, which looks at aggregated procurement in alignment with the Clean Energy Investment Accelerator and IDH for broader applications for small, medium enterprises looking to procure renewable energy on a global basis. These examples follow an internal development pipeline, which AI has utilized and found success in deploying, That is our pre-seed pilot model scale approach to development. We have criteria which follows ideas or concepts along a path to bringing them to fruition and identifying the opportunity to scale those concepts on a global basis. Now we're adding an additional lever to this approach by layering on our climate solutions portfolio concept, which is an invite for the industry, a call to action, if you will, for any program, technology, or innovative cause to join us in registering those activities to avoid duplication and redundancy and to make meaningful progress and rapid progress towards the goals that we've all set for this industry and for ourselves. In doing so, we'll initiate a program intake process with transparent and established criteria with support from an expert advisory group, along with the longstanding experience of the organization and our partners that AI has established, and then begin plotting the various initiatives within the industry along conceptual on to commercializable roles or positions of development, while at the same time allocating and identifying the appropriate funding mechanisms in order to extend or bring these projects along this development curve, informing the climate solutions portfolio as a mix of scalable, fundable, impact-driving projects and initiatives. In doing so, we'll provide greater visibility to existing programs. We'll establish the criteria in a transparent and collaborative way, utilizing a network and a growing network of organizations that will bring programs to the table. We'll call on the industry to commit to these efforts, ultimately expediting the process to meet our goals by 2030. And with that, a key unlock is increasing the capital, as we know needed to make this transition, these changes, and the implementation along the development pipeline possible. Next slide. So following our model to identify, fund, and scale, we're looking at supercharging it, as Louis described. That is to operate the registry, the portfolio, the clearinghouse, if you will, of vetted implementation programs and its partners. In doing so, that will enable us to unlock an aggregated, diverse set of funding in building out a $250 million fashion climate fund, and thus activating the registry of solutions to increase collective action and implementation. So our call to you today from a programmatic and a portfolio development standpoint is, let's be bold. Let's work together, join us in building out this vision. And here's a little bit about what that will look like. AII's industry opportunities will be scoped, and every carbon reduction program is registered with AII. This is our call to action. In fact, we're looking at a development cycle or a development approach within AII, which means we will no longer develop in-house programs, and instead we'll work closely with external partners to continue mapping out this network of solutions and innovations for the industry. In doing so, AII will aggregate industry and philanthropic funds to unlock $1 trillion in capital to accelerate decarbonization. First, starting with the $2 billion, which Louis and Emily will get into a little bit further on. And then AII stakeholders will widely adopt proven impact solutions across all tiers and interventions. That is our call to the industry to work together, to commit to utilizing this approach, and thus reap the rewards of the funding that is possible, the funding that can be unlocked, and ultimately the untapped impact that this industry has at its disposal. Now I'll turn it back over to Louis to make a fine transition into this concept of our aggregated fund and goals associated with it.
Great, thank you, Kurt. So, imagine if every brand, retailer, manufacturer, government, NGO was actually registering their pilot programs from early, mid to late stage and could actually get visibility on what carbon reduction strategies are out there. If we all were doing that, we would create this massive database of projects and programs that need resources and potentially get them out there ready for scale or populated in new regions or across new partners. But that would take a lot of resources as well. So the second part of our solution is to come up with a aggregated funding approach from philanthropy to corporate treasury to debt and equity. And so for that, I'm going to turn it over to Emily to talk about our Fashion Climate Fund.
Thanks, Louis. And you can go to the next slide. We are really looking at a fund that can be built to catalyze capital across philanthropy, industry, and debt and equity. And so by combining those funds, that creates the $2 billion of blended capital over the next 8 years, which is put into the climate solutions portfolio, which then has the power to reduce 150 million tons of carbon over the next 28 years. And I should share the numbers that I'll be sharing are coming from the $1 trillion opportunity report that AII and Fashion for Good published in November. And so that's where some of these numbers are coming from. On the next slide, we'll really see a little bit more detail around the allocation of that blended capital. And so as you can see across the pre-seed pilot model scale framework that we have, we really have about 2% or 40 million in the pre-seed, with 3% going into pilot, 5% into model, and really the majority of these dollars being allocated into the scale phase. So as you go to the next slide, the 100 million of philanthropic funds are really a catalyst and have a 19 times match to unlock that total of $2 billion in the blended capital. And on the next slide, we'll see how industry also has a role, and it has the 150 million that is really able to catalyze, I think, a 12 times match. So really by philanthropy really starting and catalyzing those dollars with 100 million, and brands and industry coming in with the next 150, that really has a huge multiplying effect when it comes to the blended capital, which is needed for scale. Here again, we can see that through AII's model, philanthropic funds accelerate the early stage innovation, and industry and debt and equity really support advancing programs to that scaled impact. And on the next slide, here we have the philanthropic ask, and the AII's Fashion Climate Fund has a goal of raising at least 100 million philanthropic dollars in the next 8 years to reach our 2030 targets. So that means we're seeking a minimum of $10 million from different lead philanthropic partners, and they're able to give 1.25 at minimum per year over the next 8 years. And to the next slide, we'll see the industry ask, where we're looking from a brand point of view. And here we're really looking at raising 150 million from the industry over the next 8 years, which looks like seeking a minimum of 10 million from each lead industry partner. And those dollars will really be the catalyst to unlocking that 2 billion that we're sharing. And so the next slide really shares that we do really need you in order to have both these value propositions come to fruition for the industry. And I will hand it back over to Louis.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah, I think the vision is made pretty clear and apparent that if we can create greater visibility, we can actually align more capital in all forms to the right stage of work, and to get these programs, ideas, and solutions ready for scalability. So we believe that this is going to create more speed and really accelerate the nature of this work, which has to happen immediately if we're going to meet those 2030 goals. We can't slow down. We can't take our time. We can't work incrementally. We really have to double down, triple down, quadruple down right now. And so this is the call to action, is to really join us and help build this. We see everyone as a part of this. This is being led by AII, but it's in partnership with not only many organizations and brands, but also many philanthropic partners, and potentially many more who will need to be a part of this work. Thank you again for listening to this video, and you can send us an email and follow through on the links to get more information about the reports that we referenced, as well as the actual information behind this deck. Thank you so much.